Hey, how are you all? Oh, there I am. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's panel session. It's so good to see all of you here. My name is Joan Mazimhaka. I am the co-founder and CEO of Illume Creative Studio, based here in Kigali, Rwanda. Thank you. Thank you so much. Today, we're speaking about the creative economy and creative industries. AI is shaking up the creative world in powerful and surprising ways, redefining what it means to imagine, design, and tell stories. From image generation to music composition, these tools are no longer just futuristic concepts, they're here. And they're changing the game for artists, designers, and creators everywhere. But with these exciting possibilities come big questions. How do we protect creativity, navigate ethical gray areas, and make sure that these tools empower rather than replace us? So today we'll explore how the creative industries can harness AI to shape a more inclusive, innovative, and dynamic future. So today's panel won't be like the usual panels. We're in a circle. We've already started the heavy debate. So today we're just going to let you in to our debate, which was going on for quite a while. So we're starting a little bit late. But with that said, I would like to introduce you all to this amazing panel. I want to begin with Honorable Jonathan Reed, Minister of Innovation, Industry, Science, and Technology in Barbados. Big round of applause, please. And he said I can call him Jonathan, so it's okay. I don't have to call him Honorable. Please, that is your name. Secondly, I want to welcome George Gachara, the board chair and founding partner of HIVA. Round of applause for George Gachara, please. Following, I want to welcome Malik Shafi Lizinde, co-founder and lead strategist at the Kigali Multimedia Hub and 63 Inc. Please also help me welcome Niles Luther, composer, cellist, art music innovator, I'm not done, composer in residence at Brooklyn Museum, and he is here today as the AI and music advisor for the Algorithmic Justice League. And finally, please help me welcome Tyler Boa, the Director of Creative Strategy and Innovation at The Brief and Bananai. Thank you all so much for being here. So as I mentioned, I had my questions and I had my topics ready, but the panel is too exciting. So we are going to talk about AI in the creative industries and the creative economy. And that's just what we're going to do. We're going to talk about it. So I want to begin with the question that I think we had earlier. Is AI good for the creative industries? Go.
So wait, do we just jump in?
You please jump in. Please do.
It's fantastic.
Did we toss the point to see who's going to be the bad guy?
I tossed it and I've decided you're going to be the bad guy. But earlier you were flip-flopping, so I can't trust you to be the bad guy. But let's try. You go ahead.
I'm absolutely the good guy on AI.
Okay.
I'm all in. So I gave a little bit of a story. I took a very unusual route to government. If you asked me if I was going to be in government 7.5 years ago, I would say absolutely not. And I ran a design firm for 10 years as creative director. The firm did well, and I had some thoughts on the development of Barbados. Called the prime minister, who wasn't prime minister at the time, weighed in some creative thought. And I didn't know that policy development and national strategy was just similar to thought to creative activity. I didn't piece them together, quite frankly. But she offered me a role, and then I got another role, and here I am. So long story short, maybe 2 years ago, I'm designing this site for a program I'm really passionate about. And I tell this designer this idea I have, that in the Caribbean, the ocean is our space. So I want an astronaut underwater. I want to build this kind of cerebral space. And I have very specific things, touch points of Barbados that are unique to Barbados that are replicated underwater. So I said, go on. I want the photo manipulation. I want these kind of components, And okay, you're going to come back to me in 3 days with a draft. They come back to me in an hour with a draft. And I said, how? And so I've been out of the game for a while because I was in government doing boring government things, right?
Yeah.
And then, how? So he said, oh, because of these tools. And I said, what? So I said, I'm all in. Love this thing. So the idea is still the idea. The taste is still the taste. You cultivate taste. You cultivate ideas. And you use tools to get you there faster. So I'm all in.
You're all in.
All in, all in.
Anybody else all in, half in?
I think it's a conversation. I think there's a spectrum. I think it's important to recognize that while these tools are extraordinarily powerful, there's also an ongoing conversation about how they're created, whose work was used to create them. And personally, as an artist, as a composer, as a musician, I'm obsessed with AI. I love AI. I use it every day. But it's not without this conscious thought of like, here's a tool in front of me, and I can leverage this tool to instantiate my vision. But there must be recognition that there are broken elements of this tool. And so the question I want to ask everyone here is, when there's a tool that is broken, as an artist, how do we engage with it? Do we critique it? Do we try and make better tools? Or is it just to be used for the manifestation and the realization of the creative vision?
I mean, I think for me, for the very first time in Africa, we have an opportunity.
Yeah.
We have an opportunity to lead, especially creatively and culturally. So it's been so many years when we talk about how Africa is very rich culturally, creatively, but we have seen other people really taking opportunities of our rich culture. So the reason I'm saying this is because usually the rest of the world advance, and then Africa, we play catch up,
Yeah.
right? So now AI is coming at a really, really good opportunity where we can advance with the world, right? We don't have to play catch up. So by that, also, it's really one of the best opportunity for us to train AI to speak on behalf of Africa, to really have all of this good insight, to do good culture. Because if you see, for example, 2 years ago, when you would ask any generative AI a question about creating an African image, you literally all you used to get Ghanaian patterns, right? That's what everyone was calling Africa.
Yes. Sure.
So today, if you are very specific on a country, you get something else. So I'm saying it's AI all in, but even most importantly for African creatives, we should really actually be all in so that we can really help these tools to understand us and understand our rich culture so that we can use it creatively.
Well, let me ask you then a follow-up, because when it comes to the talent, so we're talking about being all in for AI in Africa, but we know that to some extent some of the actual talent is behind in terms of the human beings who actually would maybe do these prompts or do the original designs.
Yep.
You have an innovation hub that you run, and a lot of you have actually trained or work with people and talent. How do we balance the talent of making sure, or balance the act of having AI take the lead, while at the same time ensuring that the human beings behind it are also in enough positions to know when AI is getting it right or wrong?
It's a combination of two, basically what you're talking about. One, there is the skill that people have to learn. And the second is carrying out the fear of AI is coming to take my job, right? So if you are a video editor today, and you look at what Sora is doing, you are scared that you're going to get fired tomorrow.
Yeah.
So now what we should be doing is the other way around in terms of education. So we should educate, and this is actually what we do at our hub, is that we are pushing our creatives to learn how to use these tools. So that when these tools eventually are really good to do as a human has been doing, you are the expert. Right? I was giving an example. You know this, back in the days, maybe 10 years ago, in Rwanda we had zero illustrator, like who could digitally illustrate anything. Today, if they ask you a list, I don't think you can find a list, right? It's endless. Because young people really adopted this technology and then so forth. So I think we really need to make sure that we are enabling them to learn. And then make them masters of these tools, so that they don't shy away of this is taking my job. But also, really, most importantly, is it's the education part, because in creative industry, most of the time we use generative AI, so which means we use prompting. So then we really need to learn prompting. And become expert, like you are a video editor, and then be AI video editor in prompting, right? An expert in prompting for video editing, so Photoshop, so anything, so that we then start really creating those type of categories in addition to everything human has been doing.
So does that, please go ahead.
There is a reflection, because the provocation is reimagining success in the creative economy through AI. So I'm thinking about the word creative economy, where creative economy is an environment in which there are industries around the creative production, but there's also culture. And so then we have to have a bit of clarity as to what these machines do to the industry. And in the industry reflection, there's productivity, efficiencies, creating products and commodities, but then there is the culture. And so I'm looking at it with a bit of anxiety, but with excitement.
Right.
Anxiety from the perspective of culture, and excitement from the perspective of industry. And all of this is happening within a context that is, I think I visited a booth where someone said the world is in a blender, where hyper-nationalism and all manner of things are happening, tech feudalism. And so then if we jump in without guardrails, then there's some risks to culture. And so how do we, because there's no creative industries, in my opinion, there's no creative industries without culture. How does cultural production continue to be supported, to be protected? How do cultural assets continue to remain cultural assets so that they're not all privatized by our idea of feeding this machine so that it understands us better? So that's my major anxiety.
That's a bit
Training LLMs.
Don't you think they can live together, though?
Yeah.
Someone can answer that, but that's my anxiety. Because my role is an enabler. I sit in the creative industries across the continent and allocate resources, whether it's human resources, financial resources, and I've been in numerous conversations, especially, and I'm playing his role, devil's advocate.
Please,
Take it.
And I sit in this place, and I want to ask myself, the young producers making music off of their living rooms, and we call it kwaito, or we call it whatever music movement there is in the subculture. How does AI support them? At what process, at what point of the process do we introduce this kind of totalitarian tools that are supposed to be amazing?
Do you see it as totalitarian? Too?
Yeah, I don't think they're totalitarian. I think they're tools that enable you to make a polished product to compete on a global level. I think that's how creatives should be looking
So
at it.
how,
The key words he's used is a polished product and to compete at a global level. And that, for me, is the side of industry.
Correct, yeah.
So I'm speaking really about culture, where these ideas are born, where is there an environment without pressure to produce global quality and competitive.
But I also think that creatives will live by anxiety anyway.
Exactly.
Right? So if we don't have an anxiety
then what
to
are we
create,
doing? How are we building new?
Exactly. So if we don't live with anxiety of creating,
Sure.
or if we don't
Destroying
have an
and
anxiety of
recreating.
what's new tool, right?
Yeah.
So every year there is color Pantone, there is new softwares. Anyway, if you don't adapt on that new way of doing things as a creative, you're always behind. So the way I see AI is that it's another tool that as a creative has to put us on that anxiety. And I see what you mean in terms of polish. But the polish comes by where we started, education. So we need to be at the forefront actually of educating AI to really create that polishy work. But actually, if we are not anxious, then AI is not for us.
But I want to touch on that point because, the AI, the tool, is a tool.
Sure.
And if we demystify it, it's a tool.
Sure.
It's a car, it's a stove, it's a
Exactly.
fridge, it's a hammer. Right? These are tools. These are incredible tools that have been created that mankind has used for purposes of good and purposes of bad. And this is no different. Now it's a super scale tool, and it's brand new, and it has turbochargers, and it does a lot of interesting things, and it does a lot of scary things. But it's a tool.
Sure.
So My uses of it and my cultural nuance makes, if you give me a brief and if you give him a brief with our cultural nuances, the output will be different with the same tools.
100%.
And that's the culture right there. That's where the culture always lives. And culture evolves. Culture is not static.
Yeah.
So you take a baseline and you add your own polish, and it's within context. So it moves.
I think the misunderstanding is that creatives are now using AI, but every creative tool that you've probably used for the last decade or more has had AI baked into it. It was just not labeled AI.
Sure.
So maybe 3 years from now, we won't even be calling these tools AI. We'll call them by their name.
Yeah.
We'll call them by what they can do. And so I think what you said is super important. Like, if we both receive the same brief, but we come from a different cultural background, our thought ideology and what we want to do is going to make something different. We're using the same tools, but it's like if I gave you a camera and I gave you a camera, you're going to come up with different results.
But I think I want to challenge that a bit too, because even Malik, you mentioned, these are tools, but these might be the first tools that don't need us necessarily. Yes, we have to learn about prompts and everything, right? But
What do
you
you mean?
mentioned
What
there's
do you mean
some.
by that?
So I'm so glad you asked. If I'm someone who's doing the prompting, right, and I want to use Sona and I want to actually create this video, as you mentioned, I can do that by myself. I don't know how to film anything though. With an actual camera. I don't know how to do production. But I can now create something that replaces everybody who was in that line. The actors, the models, the film, the editors, the actual videographers, etc. And so maybe that poses a kind of threat to the culture of the creative industries. How many people are going to still exist within them in the way that they have?
Yeah.
And when we mention learning and using the tools, that means I'm kind of possibly replacing one talent of mine with another.
Yeah.
So rather than filming this, I'm learning this tool. But how much do we take away from the existing careers or jobs or lives or expressions that once existed? Because they are just tools, but at the same time, they're quite powerful tools.
So I think it's one way to look at it, but if you ask any creative in the room, they probably do more than one thing. And they were probably like okay at it. Now they can just do even more things, and they can combine those skills to do something they maybe relied on other people to do before. So I don't think you're really taking away if people look at it as like, oh, this is another suite of tools. I can just broaden my creative capabilities that maybe I didn't have time to go and learn before.
Yes.
So that's a totally different way to look at it. So for you, yeah, maybe you can prompt and you can make a little video and stuff, and that's great. Before, maybe you relied on 3 or 4 people. Those 3 or 4 people, they should also be figuring out how they can learn other creative skill sets to broaden.
Should be, yes. But as we do talk about the creative economy, that my video production entailed 20 to 100 people. Now, those people would no longer be employed in this economy. So now, because I only need 5.
That's
So how
one
does
way
that-
to look at it. Yeah.
Yes,
So
let's talk about that one way
the
first.
second way to look at it is 2 things, right? So my biggest fear in creative industry is that if you go in tech industry, right, software engineers are not really excited about what ChatGPT is doing.
Right.
So they are very excited that OpenAI is actually an open platform that they can play with in terms of building even more code that can do more than what ChatGPT is doing, right? So what most of us in creative industry we are doing is we are mostly jumping on generative AI. So I feel like that generative AI should mainly be completely used by like new learners or like average skill for creatives. But people that we've been really in this industry, one of the things we should be doing is how do we actually invest in developing these tools, to own the tools, to be our tools, right? Like for Illum, like what do you need that you can use the open AI codes to really build it for yourself?
Yeah.
So as you're doing that, then you take along with your team, right? In a sense of like, who do I build the capacity to do what, right? So, and eventually, of course, if people don't adapt, they're going to stay behind. But if we adapt by the technology, so it's the same. Basically, you would do an illustration 20 years ago by drawing. Now there is an iPad,
Yes.
right? And then now there is AI. So now how do you then reduce of using the iPad, but jump to AI? And then AI is not ready yet.
But I think we're missing, and you touched on it before, like you pulled out creative economy. And so let's narrow that down even more. Economy. What does the economy need? It needs producers and consumers.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the end result of the production is the consumption. A market is going to consume. So you have ability to consume more, faster, better, deeper,
Yeah.
richer, whatever language, whatever goal you want to do, right? And I think that a market is available in a way that wasn't available before because the tools that you have that you didn't have before.
But, quick question, does creative output and art need to be consumed for it to be considered creative and art?
No, I'm just pulling on the title. I'm just going after economy.
Yeah.
In terms of an economy, yeah.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I mean, what you want, and we all know it, right? We have artists in our lives that we love. We love their work. And their work hasn't matured to becoming to the point where it's consumed in a way that they could sustain themselves in a way that you think their work should be sustained. Their life should be sustained with the quality of their work. We all know people that we believe in, we've invested in, we've propelled, and still the rest of the market hasn't caught up. That's the market. That's the nature of it. So there's a difference between when you're talking about an artist and the creative economy. Now, art influences the outputs. As the output is the commercial output that is then consumed. So I think there's a distinction between the two things.
Yeah.
And I think we get a little bit caught up with that because I think the opposite of how you think. I think we're going to have more jobs.
I think so.
we're going to have more placements.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have more titles. I think we're going to have more segmented roles than ever before because consumption will increase.
And you're thinking that on the production side?
I'm thinking that on every single
Both
component
sides.
of it, from the content development to the brief development to the outputs to the colorist to every single thing. I think you're going to have more need than ever before because you'll have new kind of products that you never had before.
So I think the first, I have to agree with him to a certain extent, Minister. But I also have to disagree to.
That's why you call me minister, because you want to disagree.
So my anxiety really is around the protection of culture.
Sure.
And if there is a bit of a conversation around the impact of AI on culture, then some of the anxieties can be addressed within the development of this machine. Because I think that there could be some harmful qualities.
So why don't we flip it around? Why isn't it the acceleration and scaling and spreading of culture?
I'm coming there.
Why can't I flip it around?
Let me finish my articulation. But when we come to the economy, I think as a tool for productivity, for product development, for articulation, for story world building, for new forms, for activating the intellectual property that we already have, AI is a perfect tool. I'll give you an example. I think most Africans already know the Iroko tree from Chinua Achebe's books, but we don't know how this thing looks like or what it sounds like. And so I suppose at a point, the Iroko tree can become an asset for the industry around the Chinua Achebe copyrights to create new products, new experiences, and so on and so forth. So I think AI situates itself, in my own understanding, as a great tool within the industry part of the creative economy, but could have very harmful effects to the cultural production, which is conjoined to cultural industries. So when you ask me, how do you expand, how do you imagine that film won't be taken over by the dynamic power of AI and that there will be new roles created, I imagine that there has to be a jump at a skills level, at a sophistication level, at a universe, story universe, and understanding a story universe by both the producers and also the consumers. And for me, that is the creative economy. How do we create the furniture for AI to be relevant for our own worldview? And I think if there is a conversation around that, I'd be happy. I'd be a happier person.
Yeah. But I mean, also, I think AI is going to create economy of scale in creative industry.
Sure.
Because even getting back a lot to generative AI, it's things that doesn't require you to go to school. It's like influencer economy, right?
Sure.
So you just wake up in the morning, you have a phone, it happens that you're a very good storyteller, the next day you have 1 million followers, the next day you're a millionaire. So now, a 15 years old now who sits on his computer, really, really prompting, I am sure this guy is going to lock a job as a content creator or a content writer. So any other person who's doing something else, right? Well,
I think a big misconception, like what you said earlier, is that an AI tool can just make you do something really fast. We were talking about it. I actually don't think that's true.
Okay.
I think the hours that you put in to learn the program and to play with the programs and to do outputs are just as long as traditional methods. You might be able to achieve a better result, but your time spent remains more or less the same.
And that doesn't even take into consideration the amount of time it takes to build taste, to be able to
Taste is
curate
one factor.
the output of these systems. Like, of course, anyone can log in, anyone can generate, but the quality floor is so low with a lot of this generic AI-generated content. And the question then becomes, okay, so like, how does it pass from just a simple prompt that you just throw into one of these LLMs or generative AI systems into something that has impact, something that has resonance, something that speaks to people on a fundamental level? And that requires a significant amount of time, because it's not just the time spent writing the prompt. It's the time spent investigating the world. It's the time spent absorbing elements of the human condition and our experience that give us the ability to create an incredible output.
Well, we were discussing that a bit in terms of like the Ghibli Studios issue,
Yeah.
debate that's going on. So as an animator that has crafted this look and feel that's recognizable globally and is well renowned for it, and now we can just take a photo of ourselves,
Sure.
you know, put it through this app, and now we look exactly like the characters he spent dedicated time working on. As a composer, for example, you create music,
Yeah.
and you have a certain level of taste and understanding of history and the future and what you want to bring your own culture.
course.
So what happens when I just come and say I want it in that style, and I've now created something, and now I'm a good storyteller and I'm a millionaire?
I'd be very
And
happy.
Would you really?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
I mean, this is my personal opinion,
Yes.
so I can only speak for myself, but I don't feel any threat about, like, if an AI system came out tomorrow and it was trained on my, like, entire compositional catalog. I mean, I think about the Renaissance painters who had apprentices that they taught them how to paint, and they weren't threatened by those apprentices. They were passing down knowledge.
Right.
And so I'm also considering that if there are systems trained on my music, I see it as a call to action. I see it as, oh, this is an opportunity to increase the quality floor that I was mentioning, increase the proliferation of music. And fundamentally, this system, right, if it was trained on my output, it could only likely account for maybe 80% of what the original voice is. Because when you subtract, like, all of this quantified data that's been parameterized, right? And when you take a look at what's left in the human condition that's being expressed, like that little nugget of voice that resonates with people, that makes us feel like we aren't looking at some, you know, product or output, but we're looking at some other human being's vision. That's what's left at the end of the day. So I welcome the challenge from a creative perspective, because I'm, like, firmly confident that they won't ever be able to capture that.
The other perspective is you can develop your own completely new style and taste and direction with AI tools.
Absolutely.
So with traditional methods, yeah, maybe you studied traditional art and that's like your style. There are AI artists now that have
Yes.
developed their own style,
Yeah.
that even that is hard to replicate, and they've spent years crafting that, you know, and so where do we draw the line as to, like, what's acceptable and what's not in terms of training?
But also, are we being too romantic about the idea of, it's like when you've discovered this high output master sculptor or high output master painter, and you discovered that they had an atelier with 50 people who all did the first draft.
Absolutely.
And exactly. You got disappointed, like, oh my God, you didn't hand paint this yourself?
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
of
like,
course.
we all had that moment, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like you realize, wait a minute, oh, so you had a studio with 50, 60 people and you just put your signature at the end? But it's your style, it's your concept. You've trained them in such, and you were able to scale because you had an ambition beyond just one-off pieces. You wanted to reach a critical mass.
Yeah.
Whether you want to do it for creative economy reasons, or you wanted to tell a story and reach more people, whatever tools you were using, you used the best technology of the time, and the best technology of the time 1,000 years ago was people, right? Now you have other tools to help you scale. So I think we've been a little bit too romantic about the idea of this one artist in the dark somewhere working on something for 20 years.
Definitely.
I think there is that, but the things that really truly reach scale and have volume had tools of mass production.
Yeah.
And this is a tool of mass production, but the idea is still the idea.
And to your point, like, in those studios, right, the artist has laid out all of these different elements. Like, maybe there's different people, like, all contributing to this painting.
Absolutely.
It's like an amalgamation of different experiences, an amalgamation of different inspirations. And AI tools, AI generative tools are just essentially like a contributing element to that. So I just see it as additive.
Yeah. This is going how you want it to go?
Yeah, this is great. This is wonderful. But I think,
yeah.
no, because I want to jump in on that a little bit. So from an agency perspective, for example, because the four of us have been on an agency side before, and we're talking about, for example, this balance of training the people, but also training the people on AI.
Sure.
We have all come from a background of having done this beforehand, right? So we've had to creatively think about something and conceptualize something on our own and make sure that it happens. And now we're bringing on board people where we might be like, use these tools to support, but they don't necessarily have that background of developments on their own. It's a changing time. They don't necessarily need it, right? That means that the industries themselves are shifting. You don't necessarily have to have that time when you sweat and run through a concept and run through colors and everything. Now you have these tools to substitute for that. So how does that change the way we build this next generation of talent? So maybe I'll start with you. Like, how does that look like in Malik when you're building? For example, you have your hub.
Yeah.
So when people are coming into this innovation hub and they say, I am a photographer, and I'm using these tools and I'm developing this, and you want them to be a skilled photographer, a storyteller, but now how do you build that into what you do?
I mean, when you have a creative agency, is that most of the time you actually hire people who are way, way better than you, right?
Yeah.
Because I cannot.
You're smart. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yes.
you are only the lead, but you don't. You actually play really minor role to create the output of whatever you give to a client, right? Because I don't take a camera, I don't edit, and then so forth. So you find that your role is to give them a direction, right? A strategic direction, a leadership, help them to grow, etc. But everything else, they actually, by the time they come to you, they already know. So now, and what we've been doing in the past, especially at our agency, was the creative skills in Rwanda is still a gap anyway.
Yeah.
Right? A huge gap.
Huge gap.
I always say that I'm the oldest person in my company and I'm only 36. So because all of the people we have are really, really young, and then they learn everything, most of the things they learn it on the job.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? And then what is the opportunity that AI provides? So AI is providing now an opportunity for all of us to learn at the same time. So now we in the studio, we have opportunity to shape things depending on where the world is, right? So we sit and say, I'm a video editor, this is a photographer, I do a lot of strategy work, but what does this mean? And we actually do a lot of this conversation internally with our team. And then one guy last week, he was really, really hating on Ghibli and saying, yes, this is one thing, but now go and tell AI to do Amasunzu, right? Because AI doesn't know Amasunzu. And now the conversation
So do you
was...
teach it that?
Sorry?
Do you do
Exactly.
that? Exactly, that's the point.
So now the conversation is that now, how do we actually, what are the tools do we need that would understand our creative uniqueness as a studio, so that we start really training those tools to continue doing what we've been doing, what people think we do better than everyone, but then we have AI as a supporting system. And then that's really the process we are trying to embark on. But I guess it's still really a bit of a long journey, but that's what we want to do.
Well, and then let me also ask, can you do that yourself? What does the ecosystem need to be like to allow for particularly African talent to grow at this level? Because as you mentioned, it's supercharged, right?
Yeah.
And so globally and on the continent, what do we need to have in place to make sure that this is something that can actually be long-lasting, far-reaching? Is it something that individuals have to support, like you as an individual agency would support? Is it something that we have funds like HIVA Fund saying we're going to support through these resources or through ecosystems politically? Not to remind you about being a minister, but you are a minister.
No, but I have a thought on that.
Yes.
You finish.
No, so that's what I want to know. What does the ecosystem have to look like now for these to thrive?
So I feel like, so I wouldn't take ecosystem role. I will take the specificity of the hard question of what could be governmental policy or policymakers' role in it. And I think governments can create mega projects.
Okay.
Mega projects that have such scale and scape that it has so much room for creative output because of the nature of what it is, that it allows new things to be developed, new jobs to be created, higher levels of commercial activity take place. I'll give you a specific example of Barbados. So in my previous role, I was chief of staff before I have this role I have now. And my largest project, probably still the largest project in the country, is we are the holders of the second largest repository of transatlantic slave records in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
So we have, actually on the 14th of May, is the 400th anniversary of the landing of the British on Barbados. So we hold 400 years of paper-based records dating back to the landing of the British. And so these lay dormant for 400 years, right? All types of incredible bits of truth that have never been unlocked. So when we think about this process of unlocking, and there's a huge compute component to it, there's a huge conservation component to it, there's lots of components to it. And then so we started thinking, okay, how do we convert this dormant bit of powerful data into an economy of its own, right? So the idea of what we call the heritage economy was kind of birthed. And out of that, it's creative output, right? So it's stories, it's animations, it's movies, it's documentaries, it's all range of different products, right? That all of a sudden you're going to have access to this data, right? In a controlled way, because it's precious data. But we can unlock a community to be able to build things. So as of now, who's going nuts on it is our young developers. So we have a room, 20 guys, building all kind of cool AIs, 2 of which that we're going to patent this year.
Nice.
That's building stuff that's never been done before. We're working with a couple partners thinking about huge challenges around building AIs that unlock handwriting recognition in a way that's never been done before. But the part I'm most excited about is when we unlock this data, then I let the creators go crazy. So what short films are you building? What video games are you building? What all kinds of things that are, to your point, connected to your square root of culture, because it's your story.
Yeah.
But you using all kind of cool tools to make whatever it looks like, right? So all types of things that are culturally relevant to us that have never been visualized before. Or the visualization of it can be advanced in a new type of way that was never conceived before. These tools help you go there, to my point, faster, deeper, richer. Whichever lane you take, it helps you go there. So I'm so excited by that.
That's very fantastic.
So it's a large-scale project. The mega-scale projects then allows the creative economy, I think, to get to a new level of creating products that can then reach consumable markets. And I think that's the type of role that governments can play and large institutions can play to unlock things.
Well, I think I agree with that strongly because I also sit in the in a place where I think that there is a level of sophistication that's required for these AI tools to become ubiquitous in our populations, and especially the entrepreneurs that I am mostly interested in, and their teams and their audiences. And so I'm having a softness for play. And how do you create environments where play is incentivized?
Yes.
And can these tools be depressurized? Because right now, especially because the realities they're creating are new and they are novel, there's a tendency for us to be impatient with them. Can they deliver this? Can they deliver that? Yes. Can they deliver jobs? So I feel that I think for the next year or 2 or 3 or 4, there has to be projects, whether they're private sector-led projects, at incubation level.
Yes.
For a lot of young people, for a lot of people who are reskilling to play. And something will emerge out of it before we run into attaching commercial models behind them, attaching metrics, job metrics, and all these things that are required for us to say we have an AI creative economy. Yeah. So I am soft for play. So can Africans play with this?
That was going to be my question as well.
Yes.
It's absolutely true, because I don't think we've ever really given ourselves the room to do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
When we talk about spaces where people can come and co-create, they never really get off the ground the way you hope they will, because people are looking for the output faster than they're
They
looking
want to
for.
accelerate instead of incubate.
Yes, exactly. Instead of incubating. That's
Sure.
a very good point. Yeah, these hubs are quite necessary. Yeah. Oh, all right.
It was a
We'll step
definitive
aside.
point.
It was a definitive, and you two agreed, so we didn't know where to go from there. Okay, so
I will
think-
try to disagree the next time.
I actually wanted to see if there's any challenges that you wanted to pose to each other, any questions that you wanted to have based on your different roles. Like, what would we, because I think the most important thing is, I think we have found that we're all kind of on the same side. We love to have
Yeah.
the conversation, but we're very enthusiastic about what the future of AI looks like. I think the biggest thing is how to move forward with this without leaving anybody behind, and to have people not fear what these tools can be and rather see how they can benefit from it. But I think it's so important to open up the space for what that looks like for someone who wants to learn. Where do they go? What do they do? How do they begin? Is it as easy as we think it is? Because you had mentioned, Tyler, it's not that easy to just jump onto a tool and use it. What are the steps people can take? If anybody here is a creative, for example, and they're a bit anxious, what are the steps that they should next take in terms of getting themselves familiar, getting themselves on the right side of this in terms of for their own development or growth? What would that look like?
I mean, for me, I think the best advice I could give is like learning any new creative tool. You should jump onto online forums, on Discord, on Reddit, on YouTube. Everything exists online already. You just need to go and find those bits of information. And those groups where people come together are incredibly friendly. All this stuff is new. Everybody's trying to learn and advance together. So don't be scared to post a question on a subreddit, or don't be scared to join a Discord group and say, hey, I need help with this. People will help you. And I think that's what maybe most creatives are scared of.
And to add on to that, I think, and to tie in a couple of points that are being shared, when you mentioned play, that really resonated with me as a cellist, because throughout the course of my life, I had to practice in private, in like low-pressure environments, before entering the stage. So when we consider AI from this perspective of like practice versus performance, I think it's incredibly important and presents an opportunity to let people sit down and open an AI tool for the first time and just practice as if it was an instrument. Completely no pressure, no need to output anything. But then to your point and to your question of who gets left behind, right?
Yeah.
And who are the vulnerable that have no access to these tools? Maybe they have no internet connection, or they don't have access to a laptop at home where they can play and practice with these tools. I think it's extremely important that we recognize this gap in knowledge. Like, all of us are coming from this perspective of, we've been creatives for a long time, we've been invested in this field for a long time, we're very knowledgeable about this field, but for those people that don't, how do we nurture them and provide them a safe environment so they can have access and can continue to learn?
So as I was getting onto the plane to come here, I was completely engaged as an entrepreneur and how this tool can be used for optimization and da-da-da-da-da-da. But then there's this gentleman yesterday who created a provocation. And in his remarks, he set up this scenario that AI today is like meeting Edison, just when he had this light bulb.
Yes,
Yeah.
And that rewired my thinking.
yes, yes, yes.
Because the potential of this instrument is yet to be mapped. And because it's yet to be mapped, then how then do you approach it? Because it's not a vehicle yet.
Yeah.
And so I think we're really at the early days of this thing. And for as many people who can be natives to it, then they color the eventuality of this thing.
Yeah.
Because it's also supposed to be intelligent in and of itself, which is the dynamic power that most tools that we have had before do not possess. And that dynamic power I like this. and I start to imagine the dynamic power as, so the Marvel universe is one that has exploited its assets. So we know that duck. I won't mention it. But that duck has sold us ice cream. That duck pacifies kids as toys. And so that asset has completely been optimized. But in Africa, our assets are very, this painting is on the canvas. And that's the end of it.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering then, how do we resocialize this tool to this environment where we are already limited in our expression. And the expression is so specific that we can already start to exploit our existing catalog before even creating new catalogs. Is that a question we can pose to AI and maybe for play?
But I like when we disagree.
Great.
So I like the Edison example yesterday. And so I was thinking, okay, in between light bulb and AI, there are a bunch of seminal things that were discovered that shifted humanity, right?
Sure.
And all of them were tools. And more than tools, all of them were tools to advance the physical world. And I feel like that's the part, again, two parts, the economy part and consumption, and the other part then is everything is for purpose of advancing physical life. If it's not advancing physical life, then it doesn't last. It doesn't reach in the market, right? So we all were, during COVID, we couldn't wait to get off Zoom meetings and get back to coffee shops.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to be around human beings again, even the antisocial amongst us, right? You crave that because that's the nature of humanity. All of us are wearing clothes, but we're wearing different types of clothes, right? No one's wearing the same thing in this room, right? So you have a sense of personal expression for the purpose of the physical, right? So everything serves the human's desire to be the best version of itself in whatever the circumstances is stretching for it. So sometimes it's to get out of survival mode. Sometimes it's to express itself, to have an opinion. Sometimes it's to advocate for something. Sometimes it's just to do something beautiful, right? Sometimes to do something provoking. But it's to serve humanity and also to serve the planet, right? So we are more conscious about that than ever we were before. And so the idea is to how do we use these tools for that? Because otherwise it doesn't last.
I don't get where you disagree.
Yeah,
Because
just like saying,
I agree with what you're saying.
So, I mean, I don't have the fear of culture that you have. I think that we look back at things and some moments that, wow, we wish this survived and we saw something that was beautiful.
Sure.
But it didn't survive because it might not have been relevant for that context. And something else was more relevant in that moment. And sometimes that happens. So there are purveyors of certain types of culture, and your job is to make that culture survive and hit the moment. Because if it's irrelevant to the context, then it's going to disappear. So rather than use the word guardrails, how do we give it a stage? How do we elevate it? How do we give it a platform? If we hide it in a corner and don't put it on a language model, then it's going to disappear. It's going to become irrelevant. That's the risk.
So do you think it's a matter of relevancy or subjectivity?
Both. I think subjectivity determines relevancy.
But we can use AI to make things non-subjective with creative.
Yes. So I think if you think of any culture that has started in one space and spread somewhere else, that there was a level of connection to a subcomponent of that culture that allowed it to go somewhere else. So surfing or heavy metal or
Agreed.
Afrobeats or whatever, right? You find something that resonates with you, and you're able to take it and put it to your particular circumstance. So it has to be able to scale, right? You just use tools, pathways to get there. So that could be a radio, that could be the internet, that could be a cruise ship. Is this a tool for transportation? Is the transportation of an idea?
Qatar, when you mentioned culture, did you have a fear of the commoditization of culture as well? Of like of African culture being spread out in ways that we aren't managing, or
You were talking about just
Yeah.
the use of culture.
you're talking about
right?
use of culture, not necessarily where it goes and what happens to it?
Yes, I agree with numerous definitions of culture.
Yes.
But I also imagine that culture also exists in the people
Yeah.
who are practicing the culture.
Yes,
I agree.
exactly.
And
yes.
then the creative industries sit above the people because they privatized assets.
Yeah.
And so
agree.
because this machine is really strong in one side of things, then what is a Rwandese expression with a ubiquitous AI that has privatized Rwandese expression as assets? So that's the conundrum in my mind.
That's cool.
I think
So
for me,
that then I look at culture a bit more
That's cool.
precious.
one actually speaking of the fears, maybe shifting the conversation a bit around is, especially on the continent in Africa, creative works are not known to be the most paid job. right?
Yes.
And it has been undermined, right? It's really, really undermined. Like when you tell someone you'll do a video on 5,000 USD, they laugh at you. It's like, huh? Akanukumunota, like something for 1 minute, you charge me this amount
Yeah,
of
it's
money.
per second.
So the people really, the consumer have ways they look at creative output in a completely different way. So they don't see all amount of thinking and pressure and then everything that goes into it. So because of that, any creatives, like in any industry, music, design, photography, they are the victim of being underpaid. And we are talking about economy of scale and creative economy. So now AI makes things even looks simpler. That's my only reservation, right? Because now anyone can prompt. Now anyone can write a quote.
Sure.
Now it's going to be really hard for
But not
us in a
anyone could do
business.
a good one. That's the
Yeah, that's the
difference.
thing.
But that's what I'm
That's the
saying.
point, right?
That part
But they don't
is-
understand that, right?
Yeah.
Because you
But they
have to
didn't
go
understand
through
that
the
before.
journey of education.
Yeah, they didn't understand
Yeah.
that before.
They don't
Exactly.
understand
They had
that.
bad taste before and good taste before. Exactly. So,
But he
bad
said
taste-
something that was useful, that if you are a great cellist, you are not exempt from the 100,000 hours based on that book that we read.
Yeah.
And so for you to be great with this tool, that you still have to do your 100,000 hours. So then I'm using it as an analogy. So I suppose then the learning curve is the thing that distinguishes value, both in the traditional legacy artistic practice, and if that is the same value that is transferred, then there's a cultural issue.
It's a cultural issue, I think.
A tool issue.
No, it's not a tool issue.
Sure.
It's definitely a culture issue.
Sure.
But the thing is, as we are building this, as we are trying to see how this works for us as creatives, it's also really important to remember that we can only be successful if we don't only change the culture of how we produce,
Sure.
but also if we change the culture of the consumers.
Sure.
Right? Because then if they don't come along with us and understand that there is also amount of time that has been put to train an AI tool or create good quality, and then the difference between when I create it for you and then where you create it for yourself,
Yes.
and then you'll find us really stay in that bucket of creative work being undermined.
I think the only way to fundamentally alter that paradigm, though, for the consumer is to output work that is so high quality that there's a clear gap between this floor of everything that gets generated and the thing that you create. And if it's like obvious that what you've created, this 1 minute video,
I think that's very hypothetical.
that's-
It's
that's
very
the
easy
problem.
and simple to say that, but
Yeah.
you in Rwanda, right? You live this on daily basis.
Sure.
Clients don't care. All
don't
they
care.
care
They
is
don't care.
1 minute video, I need it in 5 minutes,
Yeah.
right? They don't understand all the other process. And sometimes they will take a really crappy work and they know it's bad.
The problem
Right.
is,
But if you're talking about it from business perspective and growing the economy, that's an element we should not forget, because we can only survive if these people respect what we do. Either we are doing it with AI or not. Now, with AI, they think it's simpler.
yeah, if we talk about creative clients, they'll be like, well, I saw on TikTok or I saw on
Yeah.
Instagram,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
brand made a commercial and like, look how easy it is. They don't understand that like hundreds of hours went into training models, combining different tools, doing all of those things, coming up with a vision. They just think like, oh, magic AI button.
So then from your perspective, like, how does that re-education process begin? Because fundamentally what is being asked is like, the consumer needs to be trained on the depth of time and effort that's put into this, regardless of what they want and desire.
So that's what I was talking about. So what I was saying is that as much as we are trying to see what we should be doing as creatives, or how we should balance as learning new tools and then teaching AI new culture and new models, it's the same road that we should also be doing to also educate on the other side, that although even if I still have AI, I will still charge you what I've been charging you, or a little bit less, or a little bit this, but so that they don't understand that because you think you can prompt a glibby, and then all of a sudden you're going to pay me 80% less than
So
what you used
they-
to.
There's a need for advocacy and there's a need for community
Yeah.
building. So for all of us who are within the industry, we'd have to get on the same page of it, right? So we're saying this is how our industry works now. Going forward, this is what it means. This is how we use AI or anything else, but that doesn't change what we charge for it. There's education, there's advocacy element to it.
But you use the word charge for it, and again, let me do my version of devil advocate, I suppose. So we've all been to museums where there's this fantastic piece of work that we're blown away by, and you just, you're fascinated over it for 10, 20 minutes or whatever. You turn around the corner, and there's this piece that is a dot that you think your 12-year-old daughter could do, right? And it's sitting next to each other, and it's priceless, right? It's $100 million piece. Sure. And what? Why? Right? And then you know this amazing artist that you've seen somewhere doing incredible handcrafted work that you could buy yourself in a Senegalese market somewhere for 50 US. Sure. And you kind of grapple with that in your mind, right? Okay, what is value? And that's your word earlier, right? Subjective.
It's all subjective.
It's all subjective.
It's subjective. So, we own firms. We all in the business are trying to get better clients, right? Clients with tastes will pay you for your output, that they agree with your output.
Yeah.
Right? That their taste matches your taste, and they value the taste. That's the game we've always been trying to play.
Yeah, but we are talking about
Can't get
economy
into
of
it, Malik.
scale.
We're on time. We're on a time. I know we can go on forever, but go ahead. Let me let you finish your sentence.
No, yes. No, what I'm saying is that we are talking about economy of scale, right? So when you look at a whole different perspective of client, of course, there's a client who is willing to pay $1 million to a piece of art, right? But in Africa, we are talking about economy of scale. Like, we are talking about the very last milestone, SME, being able to actually pay a graphic designer to do something, right? Not to think that I can do everything by myself now because I have AI, which is okay, right? Then they cut costs around it. But how do we really make sure that, it's a challenge, I don't have a solution, but how do we really make sure that in and much as we are investing in learning these tools and so on, we don't forget the end consumer for what we are creating, and then take them along with us to admire what we are producing so they can pay for it.
That's actually my point at the beginning, that I feel if we embrace it as a community, to your tone, is that it will almost force the consumer and the clients to have better tastes. Sure.
Yeah,
because
no
the standard will lift, right? This is a new minimum standard. I don't want a terrible logo, because I could see that you could generate this logo. So I wanted a logo that's just not generic. I wanted to have nuance. I wanted to really feel like the story, that you really cared about what I was trying to do. So if I wanted a $100 logo, because that's the stage my company is at, I'll buy that, right? I'll go on a generator and do that. But if I really want something important that is going to shift the planet, like this beautiful logo that we have, that wasn't AI generated. Someone handcrafted that. You could feel it. So, so there are different stages that you are in your development. There are different types of clients. And that's just the nature of business, right? So I think what will happen, and I'm optimistic, I'm an eternal optimist, as you can tell, is that you will have a higher standard of the decision makers around client briefs. They'll expect more, and then they will demand more, and the skills have to meet the demands. That's what I think is going to happen.
I agree.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much. We are clearly on a journey when it comes to the creative industries and AI, but it's a fantastic journey to be on. I want to give a round of applause, please, to all of our incredible panelists. And thank you all so much for allowing us to put our backs to you and just engage in our own conversation. We really appreciate it. I'm sorry we don't have time for Q&A, I think. But of course, the panelists who are here will be able to have a chat with you if you need to. Thank you all so much for being here. And a round of applause for yourselves, too. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Oh, photo, yes, please. Okay, tall ones in the back, because we already know what's happening here. You're okay. I'll just be